Imagine you are standing on a beautiful, pristine beach.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It's a gorgeous day, right? There isn't a single cloud in the sky, and everyone around you is just completely relaxed.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it is. People are building sandcastles, they're sunbathing, the kids are splashing in the shallows,
Mm.
but you are just staring out at the water,
Right.
and you notice that the tide is pulling back. And I don't mean just a little bit, but pulling back miles and miles, exposing the ocean floor as far as the eye can see.
Oh, wow. That's a terrifying image.
Exactly. And everyone else is cheering. They're running out onto the wet sand to pick up seashells and explore the tide pools. But you know exactly what that receding water means.
You know a tsunami is coming.
You know a tsunami is coming. You know that the silence and the exposed sand are just the deep breath before an absolute catastrophe.
That image strikes right at the core of human psychological vulnerability.
It really does.
Because the water pulling back is the illusion of safety. I mean, it's a biological imperative for us to enjoy the peace, to, build those sandcastles.
Right, to just live our lives.
Yeah. But it takes a very specific, almost agonizing kind of foresight to look at that beautiful day and start frantically building a seawall while everyone else is like laughing at you or calling you paranoid.
And that agonizing foresight is exactly what we are unpacking today for you. We are doing a deep dive into an absolutely breathtaking sci-fi narrative chronicling the lore of the Infinite Armada, humanity's silent vigil.
It is such an incredible text.
It really is. Our mission today is to explore what is arguably the ultimate story of extreme long-term preparation.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a historical record of galactic survival, highlighting humanity's terrifying yet deeply awe-inspiring capacity to see the tsunami coming when the rest of the universe is just picking up seashells.
The historical lore in this shared universe is uniquely compelling, I think, because of the psychological contrast it presents.
Right.
You have a galaxy that is essentially gone to sleep, juxtaposed against a single species that simply refuses to close its eyes.
The humans.
Exactly. The narrative forces us to confront the concept of normalcy bias on this massive macro-civilizational scale.
So I want to set the stage properly for you, the listener, because you really need to understand where humanity sits in the galactic pecking order at the start of this era.
Yeah, that's important context.
The rest of the galaxy views humans primarily as engineers. Some see them as warriors based on ancient history, maybe others as explorers.
Right, they have a mixed reputation.
But the central thesis of their existence, the thing that everyone else missed entirely, is that humans prepare for problems long before those problems ever actually materialize.
Which is so rare in this setting. Most civilizations in this universe operate entirely reactively.
Right. They wait for something to break before they fix it.
Exactly. They wait for a trade dispute to escalate, and only then do they build a diplomatic back channel. Or they wait for a border skirmish to cost lives, and, only then do they commission a defense fleet.
So they're always a step behind.
Always. But humanity operates on a completely different temporal scale. They look at the structural integrity of the galaxy itself, and they start reinforcing the foundation before the earthquake even registers on anyone else's seismograph.
Okay, but I'm stuck on one detail right at the beginning of this history, though. The galaxy has been in a state of unprecedented peace for nearly 2 centuries.
200 years. Yeah.
200 years. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. If an entire galactic society hasn't seen a major war in 2 centuries, why is humanity the only species that gets paranoid?
It's a fair question.
Like, what is broken in the human psyche that we can't just enjoy the beach with everyone else?
Well, I'd argue it's less about a broken psyche and more about institutional memory.
Yeah.
I mean, 200 years of peace is enough time for an entire civilization to completely forget what an existential threat even looks like.
Oh, sure. It just becomes history.
Right. It becomes this abstract concept confined to academic history holocrons. You have to consider what 10 generations of uninterrupted prosperity does to a society's infrastructure.
I guess people get comfortable.
Very comfortable. Military-industrial complexes likely transition into civilian manufacturing. Warning systems get defunded because, well, they haven't pinged in a century.
Why are we paying for this radar if nothing's out there?
Exactly. It's the classic tragedy of the commons applied to galactic defense. Everyone assumes someone else is watching the radar, so nobody actually does.
Wow.
But humanity, however, seemed to internalize the cyclical nature of history. They remembered the forgotten lesson.
Which is?
That peace is always just a parenthesis between conflicts.
A parenthesis between conflicts. That is That's chilling. But they didn't just sit around philosophizing about history. They were actively looking at the shadows.
Oh, they were deeply embedded in the data.
Yeah, if you look at the human data from that era, analysts were tracking anomalies the rest of the galaxy actively ignored.
Things that seemed minor to everyone else.
Right, like pirate empires in the Outer Rim were quietly consolidating territory. Several aggressive isolationist species were secretly rearming.
Which is a huge red flag.
And most chillingly, ancient, degraded signals were being detected from way beyond explored space. The human seclusion wasn't a question, it was a definitive statement. Storms were coming.
Those microtrends are crucial to understand because the galactic authorities just wrote off the pirate consolidation as local law enforcement issues.
Just send a few police cruisers, it's fine.
Yeah, they viewed the rearmament as internal posturing. But the human analysts were applying a macro-analytical lens to it all. They saw these isolated data points as interconnected symptoms of a degrading galactic equilibrium.
They saw the big picture.
And those ancient signals, specifically, trigger a fascinating implication regarding the Fermi paradox.
Oh, how so?
Well, if the galaxy is generally quiet, and suddenly you start picking up degraded high-energy emissions from the dark zones, the logical conclusion isn't that a new star is forming.
Right.
It's that someone or something is burning energy on a massive, massive scale.
And humanity didn't bother writing a strongly worded memo to the Galactic Council about this. They just started acting.
They bypass the bureaucracy completely.
And this is where the rumors begin in the lore. It starts in the Outer Rim. A merchant vessel is just traveling along a standard shipping lane, and the captain reports that their deep space sensors detected a human fleet stretching across an entire star system.
Just an unimaginable scale.
Not a patrol squadron. The captain swears there are thousands of ships, maybe millions, just holding position in deep space.
And predictably, the psychological inertia of peace is just too strong for the authorities to take the report seriously.
They just ignore it.
They dismiss it as nonsense. They write it off as a sensor glitch caused by cosmic radiation, or maybe a hallucination brought on by deep space isolation.
Because believing it would mean the peace is over.
Exactly. Acknowledging a multi-million ship armada means acknowledging the end of their 200-year golden age. And they weren't ready to do that.
But then 3 weeks later, another crew reports the exact same thing in a completely different sector, and then another.
The rumors start multiplying.
Soon, these bizarre anomalies are spreading through every corner of the galactic extranet. And it's not just fleets, it's the sheer incomprehensible logistics surrounding those fleets.
Industrial footprint.
Right. The records detail human shipyards operating at maximum capacity day and night. Asteroids vanishing entirely from mining sectors.
Just completely gone.
And then the most insane anomaly of all, entire moons disappearing, just gone.
Erased from the map.
Yeah, leftover gravity wells and dust rings where a celestial body used to be. Gigantic industrial stations appearing around totally uninhabited, resource-poor stars.
We really need to stop and look at the mechanics of an entire moon disappearing.
Please, because my mind boggles at that.
That means the humans aren't just surface mining. They're dismantling celestial bodies down to their molten cores for raw materials.
Which shouldn't even be possible.
The physics of that are staggering. You would need to establish localized gravity shears just to prevent the moon from fracturing uncontrollably and causing a debris field that would wipe out the system.
Oh, right, because if you just blow it up, you can't harvest it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd need automated drones, swarms the size of continents, to strip the mantle, refine the silicates and metals in hard vacuum, and transport millions of megatons of refined material without disrupting the orbital mechanics of the entire host system.
It's god-level engineering.
They are engaging in stellar engineering on a scale that the rest of the galaxy literally cannot process. It registers to them merely as strange rumors because it sits entirely outside their paradigm of normality.
It's the ultimate eccentric neighbor scenario.
I love this analogy.
Let's put this in relatable terms for you listening. Imagine you live in a quiet cul-de-sac. Nothing bad ever happens. You have a neighbor, maybe a bit quiet, keeps to himself.
Sure.
One day, you notice he's quietly taking deliveries of 10,000 bags of concrete.
Just piling them up in the driveway.
Right. Then, massive steel I-beams start arriving on flatbeds. Then an industrial earth mover shows up in his backyard.
And you're just watching this from your kitchen window.
Yeah, and you walk over to the fence and say, hey, what are you building? A patio, a bunker. And your neighbor just stares at you with a completely blank expression and says, it's an internal matter.
That analogy captures the diplomatic frustration perfectly. The Galactic Council is basically the neighborhood association, completely unequipped to deal with industrial-scale paranoia.
Right. And every single time the Council sends an official inquiry to Earth regarding the missing moons or the massive energy spikes, they receive the exact same automated diplomatic response.
Human construction projects are internal matters.
Internal matters. If my labor told me 10,000 bags of concrete were an internal matter, I would never sleep again. I'd be checking my locks every hour.
Yeah.
But the galaxy just shrugs it off.
They shrug it off because taking it seriously would require action.
It would ruin the beach day.
Precisely. It requires diverting massive amounts of resources, capital, and labor away from the civilian economy, the things that improve the immediate quality of life, and funneling them into a military-industrial black hole.
Nobody wants to do that during a golden age.
The normalcy bias we discussed earlier acts as a protective psychological shield. The galaxy tells itself the humans are just eccentric engineers hoarding metal. That's a comforting lie.
But the truth behind that lie was buried deep beneath Earth, literally. The missing moons, the thousands of ships spotted on sensors, they were just the exhaust fumes of the real engine.
The tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. Let's dig into the architecture of this paranoia. Let's talk about Project Horizon.
Project Horizon is the beating heart of this entire historical record. Its origins are deeply subterranean, beginning kilometers beneath Earth's rock and steel.
Like a literal bunker.
Yes. The archive suggests that only a handful of leaders, maybe an oligarchy of defense analysts and AI overseers, even knew its true operational parameters at its inception.
Kilometers of rock and steel. That gives it this doomsday bunker mentality from day one. And the stated operational doctrine of Project Horizon is where I really want to challenge the premise.
Okay, hip here.
The mandate was build enough ships to defend humanity against any possible threat, no matter how large, no matter how powerful, no matter where it came from.
A very broad mandate.
Is this the ultimate expression of visionary foresight, or is this a species entirely consumed by a pathological, almost psychotic level of paranoia? Because destroying moons to fight a hypothetical enemy sounds like madness.
Well, the line between profound foresight and pathological paranoia is entirely dependent on retrospective validation.
What do you mean by that?
If the threat never arrived, humanity would have spent centuries cannibalizing their own universe, destroying the natural beauty of the cosmos for a ghost.
They'd be the villains of the galaxy.
It would have gone down as the greatest, most tragic misallocation of resources in galactic history. But from a purely strategic, game theory standpoint, the architecture of Project Horizon is a masterclass in absolute risk mitigation.
Because they assumed the worst-case scenario.
They recognized a fundamental truth, that the universe is a dark forest. They weren't building a fleet to fight a specific known enemy. They were building a mathematical firewall against the concept of extinction itself.
A mathematical firewall. And to build that firewall, they had to turn the vacuum of space into an assembly line. The scale of production we are talking about just defies traditional economics.
It transcends economics entirely.
Factories built in the upper atmospheres of gas giants to harvest fuel. Automated shipyards surrounding dead stars, using the thermal energy to power the forges.
Harvesting dead stars.
Artificial intelligence managing the logistics of mining fleets, harvesting entire asteroid belts.
The role of artificial intelligence is the only way this functions. To manage logistics on this scale, coordinating millions of automated mining drones, aligning the supply chains across light years, calculating the orbital mechanics of dismantling a moon.
The human brain just can't do that.
It's impossible. You require an intelligence completely decoupled from human fatigue or political hesitation. An algorithm whose singular directive is exponential growth.
Right.
The AI doesn't pause to ask, do we have enough ships yet? It only asks, how can we optimize the supply chain to build the next trillion tons of armor plating 0.4 seconds faster?
Compounding interest applied to dreadnoughts.
Precisely. Every year, production increased. The factories built more factories. The drones mined materials to build more drones. It's the von Neumann probe concept weaponized.
But here is the massive physical contradiction I can't wrap my head around. How do you hide it?
The thermodynamics problem.
Yes. Thermodynamics in space is a nightmare. You can't just hide the heat exhaust of an automated shipyard churning out millions of warships. A sensor array light years away should be able to detect the infrared signature of that much industry.
It absolutely should.
Yet, for decades, no one realized how big the project actually was. Because the ships were hidden. The lore refers to them as sleeping fleets, stationed beyond mapped territory.
Hiding the thermal signature of an exponentially growing armada is, Well, it's an engineering puzzle that requires radical solutions.
Right, because there's nowhere for the heat to go.
Exactly. So the most likely method, based on the archives, is that they utilized dark nebulae. These massive, dense clouds of interstellar dust and cold gas.
Oh, it's like cryogenic sinks.
Yes, exactly as cryogenic sinks. They built the shipyards inside these nebulae, allowing the ambient cold and dust to absorb and sort of scatter the thermal exhaust and radiation.
That is brilliant.
It is. And once the ship was completed, it powered down completely. Zero emission hibernation.
No life support, no active reactor cores.
Nothing. No subspace communications. Just cold metal drifting in the void, literally matching the ambient temperature of deep space. Perfectly camouflaged against the background radiation.
Sleeping fleets. Just the phrase gives me chills. Vast, dark nebulae, completely silent, no engine burns. Just millions of massive warships powered down, covered in a thin layer of cosmic frost, perfectly maintained by silent, low-energy drones. Just waiting in the dark.
Like ghosts.
For 100 years.
The political willpower required to sustain that century of silence is phenomenal. I mean, for 100 years, human leaders funneled astronomical amounts of capital and resources into black sites.
Brazilians of credits.
They were building an armada they could never publicly acknowledge to fight a threat they couldn't definitively prove existed. They were building ghosts.
I'm waiting. But 100 years is a long time to wait for a storm.
It is. But that century of waiting was the crucible that allowed the AI logistics to compound to an apocalyptic scale.
And then, the reason for their century of paranoia finally crests over the horizon. The tsunami arrives at the absolute edge of the galaxy. Let's discuss the dark signal and the arrival of absolute biological terror.
Right. 100 years after Project Horizon begins, the ultimate justification materializes. An automated exploration probe drifting at the extreme outer edge of the galactic halo transmits a telemetry burst.
Okay.
It consists of only 3 words before the probe signal is permanently severed. They are coming.
They are coming. It's not a distress call. It's not a request for diplomatic backup. It is a fatalistic, almost clinical observation.
The statement of fact.
And the cascade of failure that follows is terrifying. The first probe disappears. 2 months later, a deep space listening post vanishes.
Just drops off the grid entirely.
Then entire peripheral observation stations just go silent. The edge of the galactic map is literally being erased piece by piece, and whatever is erasing it isn't broadcasting any demands.
The transition from scientific curiosity to existential dread happens rapidly here. The fear spreads through the scientific and astrophysical communities first, because they are the ones looking at the raw data.
Right, the politicians are still asleep.
Exactly. The scientists are tracking the gravitational anomalies and the sudden absence of starlight where stars should be. They don't know what exists beyond the galactic borders until the first visual telemetry finally breaks through the interference.
And it's bad.
And what those images show completely shatters the galactic paradigm of warfare.
Because the galaxy is used to political squabbles. Trade route disputes, border skirmishes with other bipedal aliens and shiny metal ships firing plasma torpedoes.
Rules of engagement, treaties.
It's civilized, rule-based conflict. But the images show something physically impossible. Living starships. Biological machines that are thousands of kilometers long. The records indicate they didn't just conquer territories, they consumed entire civilizations. They stripped planetary crusts bare and harvested the energy of stars. The galaxy names them based on their only observable function, the Devourers.
When we analyze the biology and mechanics of the Devourers, we understand why diplomacy, game theory, and traditional warfare instantly fail.
You can't talk to them.
No. These aren't political actors making rational geopolitical calculations. They're a biological imperative scaled to the cosmic level. They are an apex predator that feeds on celestial mechanics.
That's horrifying.
You cannot negotiate a treaty with a biological machine that views your entire solar system merely as a source of caloric intake and raw carbon.
I see it less like a traditional enemy and more like a galactic-scale cancer. Or, a locust swarm.
Yeah, that fits.
If a swarm of locusts descends on a farming community, the mayor doesn't send out an ambassador to discuss a ceasefire.
Please stop eating our crops.
Right. The locusts don't harbor political animosity. They don't even know the farmers exist as conscious feeling entities. They just see the wheat and they consume it. The Devourers are a cosmic locust swarm, and their wheat is planets, stars, and billions of lives.
Cancer is actually the more accurate analogy, I think. Because locusts are driven by starvation, whereas a cancer is driven by relentless, unchecked biological expansion.
Unchecked growth.
And because of that terrifying reality, The extinction equation becomes undeniable. The sudden injection of this reality into the galactic consciousness causes immediate panic.
I can imagine.
Emergency summits erupt on every core world. Governments demand answers from militaries that have been ceremonial for centuries.
And the math is brutally, objectively against them. No defensive fleet is large enough. No coalition of alien governments is strong enough. The orbital scans show that the Devourers number in the millions.
Millions of continent-sized organisms.
Right. These aren't million-man armies holding rifles. These are millions of living starships, each one the size of a continent, capable of digesting a biosphere. Every single supercomputer simulation, every strategic model predicts the exact same outcome. Total galactic extinction within a decade.
This triggers the total psychological collapse of the 200-year Golden Age. It's a fascinating socio-political phenomenon. One by one, advanced civilizations accept the truth of their own demise.
They just give up.
They look at the telemetry, they look at their own rusting, undersized defense fleets, and they realize there's a massive, insurmountable deficit. The tragedy of the commons finally comes due. They're staring at the end of their history, and there's nowhere left to run.
But then, Earth finally breaks its silence.
Great reveal.
With the entire galaxy effectively drafting its own will and testament, humanity steps up to the microphone. The archive state, for the first time in centuries, humanity activated Project Horizon. And this sequence is perhaps the most cinematic, reality-breaking moment in the entire history. The impossible reveal. Let's set the scene at the Galactic Council chamber.
The tension leading up to this moment is suffocating. The entire galaxy is watching this emergency broadcast. The human ambassador, representing a species long considered eccentric and paranoid, steps before the Galactic Council.
And he doesn't even say anything at first, right?
No, he doesn't offer a speech. He simply projects a holographic star map into the center of the chamber. The map is covered in thousands of hidden coordinates, situated in nebulas and dead zones, all glowing in angry red.
The council just stares in total confusion. They have no idea what they're looking at. And the ambassador just smiles grimly and says, "We have a fleet."
Understatement of the millennium.
Now, put yourself in the shoes of an alien council member listening to this. You know the humans have been hoarding resources. You've heard the crazy rumors about the missing moons and the concrete deliveries. So you are expecting a big fleet.
A really big fleet.
Maybe thousands of ships. Maybe, if humanity has been incredibly industrious and stretched their economy to the breaking point, tens of thousands of ships.
Which, by normal galactic standards, would be an awe-inspiring secret armada. It might even be enough to slow the Devourer vanguard down for a few days, giving a few colony ships time to flee.
Sure, a tactical retreat.
But a few tens of thousands of ships wouldn't alter the fundamental extinction equation.
Exactly. They are bracing themselves for a respectable but ultimately futile number, and then the actual data scrolls across the bottom of the map. The council chamber falls completely, deathly silent because the number isn't in the thousands.
No.
It isn't in the millions. It is in the hundreds of billions.
Hundreds of billions of warships. Not soldiers, not automated drones, but fully armed, capital-class warships.
It's hard to even picture that.
It is an integer so vast that it completely shatters the cognitive framework of the council members. It's a number that belongs in astrophysics, not military logistics. For over a century, the exponential growth we discussed earlier, managed by a relentless artificial intelligence, had compounded into a literal force of nature.
And this leads to what I think is the most profound exchange in the entire historical record. One council member, totally shell-shocked, his worldview entirely collapsing, whispers, "How many ships do humans possess?"
It's such a great line.
And the ambassador answers, with complete terrifying honesty, "We stopped counting 80 years ago."
It is a brilliant, chilling piece of dialogue because it highlights the mind-bending reality of what humanity has unleashed. At a certain threshold of exponential growth, counting becomes strategically irrelevant.
You just don't need to know anymore.
Right. When your military-industrial output transcends calculation and enters the realm of astronomical mass, the exact integer is meaningless. The AI overseeing the logistics likely just flagged the total combat capability as sufficient and redirected processing power away from auditing and into building the next sector.
We don't need to count them, we just need to build more.
They gave up doing the math because the math was a bottleneck to production.
It's like asking the ocean how many drops of water it contains. It doesn't matter, it's the ocean and it's about to drown you. And then we get the physical manifestation of this ocean. Across the galaxy, the sleeping fleets wake up. Ancient subspace gates power on. Massive stealth hangars hidden inside asteroids unlock.
It is the greatest simultaneous mobilization in universal history. The culmination of a century of silent subterranean paranoia is finally dragged out into the light.
The ghosts are waking up.
Human fleets emerge from every conceivable vector. They drop out of hyperspace around core stars. They burn out of the dark nebulae. They slingshot around black holes.
The sky itself fills with metal, and the technological impact of this arrival is both terrifying and somewhat darkly humorous. Observers on alien worlds couldn't even calculate the size of the armada because their planetary sensors physically crashed.
The hardware just couldn't handle the data.
Right. Computer networks, designed to track maybe a few thousand civilian freighters, completely overloaded and melted down, trying to process the billions of new data points suddenly flooding the system. Everywhere people looked, humanity appeared. A fleet so massive it caused software to fail.
We must unpack the dual nature of this reveal, though, because it's not purely a moment of triumph.
Oh, definitely not.
On one hand, you have the immediate, euphoric realization of salvation. The tsunami is about to hit the beach, and suddenly an impossibly large seawall of iron and fusion rises out of the ocean.
Thank God for the humans.
But on the other hand, the alien races are experiencing a terrifying epiphany about humanity's true nature. They're looking at a species that managed to secretly turn a significant percentage of the galaxy's raw mass into weapons of mass destruction right under their noses without ever breaking operational security.
It's deeply unsettling.
It is salvation wrapped in profound existential intimidation.
You hit the nail on the head. Because if humanity can build hundreds of billions of warships to fight a cosmic cancer, what happens if, after the war, they decide to point those ships at the Galactic Council?
That is the unspoken fear.
It's terrifying. But right now, beggars can't be choosers. The devourers are at the gates. And a massive fleet is ultimately just potential energy metal, AI, and fusion drives. To actually stop a biological swarm, humanity had to take this infinite armada and throw it directly into the meat grinder. Let's move to First Contact and the strategy of the Wall of Determination.
The Devourers breach galactic space, executing their biological imperative without hesitation. Entire outer sectors vanish within hours. Dozens of frontier worlds fall. Billions of lives are extinguished as planetary crusts are consumed.
It's a massacre.
And then, the vanguard of the human fleet arrives to intercept them.
The archives described this first major engagement as legendary. It lasts for 7 continuous days and 7 nights. And the visual imagery is apocalyptic. The light of the local stars literally disappears, blocked out by the endless formations of human ships moving into firing positions.
We need to analyze the tactical reality of this specific type of engagement. The Devourers are a hive-mind biological swarm. They attack without fear, without hesitation, and without any concept of self-preservation.
They don't retreat.
Never. They don't have morale that can be broken. They don't have supply lines you can disrupt. They just consume and multiply. Historically, an enemy with those traits is unstoppable because traditional warfare relies on breaking the enemy's will to fight.
But humanity didn't respond with a silver bullet. They didn't deploy a magical superweapon or a giant laser that could vaporize the whole swarm in one shot.
No elegant solutions here.
Instead, they responded with something much more fundamental and brutal. The historians call it determination. But practically speaking, it was sheer, unrelenting, mathematically absurd attrition warfare.
Exactly. It was an exercise in pure logistics. When one human defensive formation was annihilated by the swarm, another formation seamlessly shifted to replace it. And then another, and another.
Just a wall of metal.
It was a macro-scale conveyor belt of warships feeding directly into the front lines faster than the Devourers could destroy them. The human fleet seemed functionally infinite.
It's the ultimate unstoppable force meeting the ultimate immovable object. I wonder what the shock to the Devourers must have been like, assuming a biological machine has the capacity for shock or at least a feedback loop for unexpected resistance.
A negative stimulus, yeah.
For the first time in their entire evolutionary history, this mindless, consuming swarm was physically halted. Not because they were outsmarted or outmaneuvered, but because they hit a wall of metal that was somehow more endless than their own hunger.
It's a critical systemic shock. A biological machine relies entirely on the premise that its prey will eventually run out of mass, energy, or the psychological will to maintain the defense.
Everything eventually gets eaten.
But the humans had weaponized the very concept of exponential growth. They turned their entire industrial base into a regenerative shield. The swarm's advance broke because they simply couldn't eat through the armor faster than the automated shipyards were producing it.
Humanity proved their mettle. They proved that a century of eating the galaxy's mockery and destroying moons was entirely justified.
Vindicated.
But what shocked the surviving alien civilizations even more than the raw size of the fleet or the fact that humans could fight a cosmic cancer to a standstill was who humanity chose to fight for. The strategy of deployment completely upended expectations. Let's delve into the neighbors doctrine.
Up until this exact moment, the galaxy's geopolitical assessment of humanity, especially after the terrifying reveal of the fleet's size, was that humans were hyper-militaristic, xenophobic survivalists.
Which makes sense on paper.
The entirely logical assumption, based on game theory, was that Earth had built this infinite armada solely to defend human-occupied space. The Council fully expected humanity to pull up the drawbridge, fortify their own solar systems, and let the rest of the galaxy burn to ash.
Which, let's be honest, would make total sense. The rest of the galaxy ignored human warnings for 2 centuries. They mocked the human analysts. They complained about the construction noise.
You made your bed, now lie in it.
Exactly. But instead of retreating into a shell, humanity fans out. They deploy fleets to defend alien homeworlds. They assign heavy cruisers to escort vulnerable alien refugee convoys. They drop medical frigates into active war zones to pull billions of aliens out of the fire.
Risking their own assets.
And by doing so, humanity absorbs enormous, horrific casualties that they could have easily avoided.
The shift in humanity's moral alignment in the eyes of the wider galaxy is profound here. They are not acting as isolationist survivalists. They are actively functioning as a galactic immune system.
An immune system, I like that.
They view the entire galaxy, regardless of species or political affiliation, as their community. This fundamentally redefines the historical purpose of Project Horizon. It was never intended to be a selfish survival bunker. It was conceived from day one to be a shield for everyone.
There is a specific exchange recorded in the archives that captures the emotional core of this doctrine perfectly. A galactic journalist manages to interview a human fleet admiral mid-campaign.
Oh, this is a great moment.
The journalist, totally bewildered by human tactics, asks the admiral, "Why are you sacrificing so much of your own fleet, your own people, for strangers who mocked you?" And the admiral just looks confused by the premise of the question. He doesn't launch into a grand political manifesto. He simply replies, "Because they're not strangers, they're our neighbors."
That specific phrasing, "they're our neighbors," is an incredibly powerful philosophical statement. It strips away all the complex geopolitical treaties, the species divisions, the historical grievances.
That makes it simple.
It reduces galactic-scale survival to the innate simplicity of a local community. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't stand on your lawn and ask if they listen to your advice about installing smoke detectors. You grab a hose and run into the heat.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and imagine being one of those alien species for a moment. You have spent centuries enjoying a golden age, maybe looking down on humanity as these weird, paranoid engineers who hoard metal and refuse to attend the galactic parties.
It's just the weird guys next door.
You actively ignored their frantic warnings. You basically told them they were crazy. And now the sky is literally falling, a biological nightmare is digesting your homeworld, and who drops out of hyperspace to take a direct hit meant for your escape pod?
A human warship.
A human warship. They sacrifice their own crew to save you simply because they consider you a neighbor. The level of grace and radical empathy required to do that is staggering.
It is an unparalleled display of collective empathy, but an empathy backed by overwhelming apocalyptic firepower.
Empathy with dreadnoughts.
And this empathy was the primary driving force of their grand strategy. They weren't just fighting an extermination campaign to kill the Devourers. They were fighting to preserve the very concept of a shared galactic community. And that singular unifying purpose is what carried them into the absolute climax of the war.
Which brings us to the grinding finale. 5 incredibly bloody, brutal years into the conflict, the Devourers realize they are losing the war of attrition, and they escalate.
The final boss arrives.
The Devourer Hive finally arrives in galactic space. The archives describe this entity as the central node of the invasion. It is a living, biological structure larger than an entire solar system. Let's just process the physics of that. An entity larger than a solar system.
It functions as the queen of the cosmic swarm, and its destruction immediately becomes humanity's final, absolute objective.
Cut off the head of the snake.
Tactical analysis dictates that if you don't destroy the central hive, the swarm will eventually regroup, reproduce, and return. But to defeat an entity of that sheer mass requires a concentration of kinetic and thermal force that is almost impossible to calculate, let alone coordinate.
So humanity makes the ultimate gamble. They gather every available fleet from across the galaxy, not just a vanguard, not just a specialized strike force, every single ship that can still fire a weapon.
Everything they have.
Billions upon billions of ships abandoning their defensive lines, converging to form the largest singular armada ever assembled in the history of the known universe. They bring the entire staggering weight of Project Horizon to bear on this one location.
The logistics of simply gathering that many ships into a single theater of war is an engineering miracle that borders on magic.
Yeah.
Well, when you put billions of capital ships into one localized area of space, the combined mass of their hulls and fusion drives should theoretically create localized gravity wells that tear the fleet apart, or even trigger the formation of a black hole.
They're fighting physics just to park the ships.
They had to utilize AI-managed microspacing to balance the gravitational shear, and the battle that follows when they engage the hive literally shakes the foundational physics of the sector. The records state that ambient stars were detonated as collateral damage. Space itself seemed to tear apart under the stress of the weapon discharges.
And this went on for almost 2 weeks.
For 13 continuous days, the fighting rages at an intensity that defies comprehension.
13 days of nonstop, reality-bending warfare. And then humanity unleashes its final decisive tactic. And the brilliant part is that it's not a secret new weapon, it's a supreme act of coordinated willpower.
Perfect synchronization.
The command goes out, and every single fleet, every single ship, every single weapon platform focuses on one exact target coordinate on the hive's surface. They take billions of lasers, antimatter missiles, and kinetic railguns, and they converge them onto a singular microscopic point to shatter the hive's armored mantle.
Let's break down the sheer, terrifying discipline required to execute that maneuver. We're talking about synchronizing a multi-billion ship armada across millions of miles of chaotic, debris-filled space.
While getting shot at by a solar system-sized monster.
Exactly. The communication latency issues alone, the sensor ghosting caused by radiation, the sheer noise of a battle that size. To synchronize fire perfectly onto one singular point requires a fusion of AI logistical supremacy and raw human determination that no other species could ever hope to replicate.
The AI does the math, but humans pull the trigger.
The tactical AI calculated the exact microsecond each ship needed to fire so the energy wave would arrive simultaneously. But it was the human crews holding the line, refusing to break formation while under heavy fire, that made it possible. It is the ultimate culmination of their century of preparation.
The ultimate strike. The combined energy shattered the hive. The central intelligence of the devourers dies, and the swarm collapses into dormant, dead mass.
It's over.
And the archives summarize the immediate aftermath with such a haunting phrase: silence returned. The tsunami has finally crashed over the land, the waters recede, and the ocean is calm again. But the story doesn't simply end with the death of the devourers. There is a deeply poignant socio-political aftermath.
The aftermath is where the true legacy of the Infinite Armada is permanently cemented. The galaxy survives, but barely. It is a Pyrrhic victory on a cosmic scale.
There's a lot of ruin.
Entire sectors are reduced to radioactive dust and need centuries of rebuilding. Countless worlds are mourning billions of dead. And human losses, while heavily classified, are stated to be beyond calculation. The cost of acting as the Galactic Shield was astronomical in terms of blood and treasure.
Yet, amidst the ruins, celebrations spread everywhere. And the fundamental shift in perception we talked about earlier is permanently solidified. Civilizations that once distrusted Earth, that viewed humans as eccentric, concrete-hoarding paranoiacs, now see humanity through an entirely different lens.
A total paradigm shift.
They are no longer viewed as conquerors or mere warriors. They are viewed with near-religious reverence as guardians, the species that bore the burden of foresight when no one else would.
They earned the title of Guardians of the Stars not just through raw martial supremacy, but through the sacrificial, unflinching application of the neighbor's doctrine. The epilogue of the historical record jumps 50 years into the future to show us the long-term cultural impact of this paradigm shift.
The galaxy recovering.
Right. Diplomatic and civilian visitors from every corner of the galaxy make pilgrimages to Earth.
They come to see the famous Central Memorial. And this monument, it is incredibly moving. It contains a single primary inscription: "We built the fleet because we hoped we would never need it."
That is just wow.
I want to pause and just reflect on the profound tragedy and beauty of that philosophy. All of that century-long preparation, all the agonizing secrecy, the paranoia, the missing moons, it was all ultimately rooted in hope.
Oh, for peace.
They didn't build the fleet because they craved a war or desired galactic conquest. They built it because they desperately wanted to preserve the peace. They wanted to be wrong.
It captures the ultimate tragedy of the prepper mindset. You spend your entire life preparing for a disaster, secretly hoping the whole time that you were just crazy, hoping that your preparations are a colossal waste of time and money.
Because the alternative is horrible.
Because if you are right, it means the world is actually ending. The architects of Project Horizon were right, and millions of their own people died to prove it. Below that first line is another inscription, one that the lore states every child in the surviving galaxy now learns in school. When the darkness came, humanity was ready.
It's beautiful. It really is a testament to the weight of responsibility. But the historical record doesn't let us leave on just a purely triumphant, peaceful note. There is a final twist, a haunting, lingering detail that totally recontextualizes the entire post-war era.
I love this ending.
It reveals that somewhere beyond the stars, in the deepest, uncharted dark nebulae, the hidden shipyards are still quietly working.
That is the most profound and unsettling revelation in the entire text. 50 years after the greatest threat in the history of the universe was utterly destroyed, the automated AI-driven shipyards haven't been deactivated.
They are still churning out ships.
They're still mining, still forging, still building. Why keep building? Because the human analysts learned the ultimate, inescapable truth of the universe. Preparation is the only thing that saves civilizations. The infinite armada is truly infinite because the preparation never, ever stops.
And it leaves you with this incredible, chilling question. If the AI algorithms never shut down, if the automated shipyards around gas giants and in the dark nebulae are still churning out capital ships half a century after the Devourers were wiped out, what do the human analysts think is coming next?
That's already a question.
What new shadows are they seeing in the data that the rest of the galaxy is once again ignoring?
The galaxy feels safe for now. They are back to picking up seashells on the beach, enjoying the sunshine. But somewhere deep underground, in rooms lined with steel and rock, humanity is still watching the tide.
Wow, what a perfect, terrifying place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Infinite Armada. We hope this exploration encourages you to keep looking deeper, to question what anomalies lie just beyond the edges of your own mapped territories, and to always respect the neighbor who is quietly buying concrete. Because when the storm finally breaks, you're going to want them on your side. Until next time.